All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. And as part of the Rankin Technical College Application and Website Development, or AWD 1111, Database-Driven Web Development course, I'm doing a series of video presentations. And so far I have done presentations based on some of the PDFs under the Valley of Code, which is a website from Mr. Flavio Copes. And I've gone through his HTML handbook, and it's about 75 pages, and broken it down into 5 different videos. I went through his CSS handbook, which is about 175 pages, broke it down into about 10 videos, and went through his 56-page JavaScript handbook and made about 6 videos. All right, so this was all client-side JavaScript stuff. Before I go on to the server side, which I am going to do very shortly, I've decided that I wanted to first do a couple things. First of all, as a bit of review, and I was going to go back and retape these, but I didn't. But if you do look, this is our, let's see. Here we go. This is the book that we had first semester, Murox JavaScript and jQuery 4th edition. And if I go to the table of contents, what I did was I had previously done PowerPoint presentations on many of these chapters. All right, so I went back to chapter 4, and it was a 2-part thing, and the second part was on how to handle events and use functions, and it talked about the arrow function. I believe at least that's in there. I'll have to go back and double check. All right. Next, I went down all the way to chapter 15 and put in a couple presentations because it has things like some skills with working with arrays, using sets, etc. Then I went and did the same thing with chapter 18, which was on how to work with JavaScript, because in there, what's discussed among other things are the use of promises, async, and await. And finally, as a little prelude, so to speak, to Node.js, I put in the stuff for chapter 19, which is a short chapter they put in there, which was on how to work with Node.js. So if you go out to, where are you? There you go. If you go out to the website for this course, and don't worry about this, you'll all have been sent this before, probably will be again. You'll notice that right now there's like 28 videos on it. All right. They're the 5 HTML review, the 10 CSS reviews, the 6 JavaScript reviews, then again Murox, part 2, and I may add part 1 as well, I don't know. For chapter 4, chapter 15 parts 1 and 2, chapter 18 parts 1 and 2, chapter 19 parts 1 and 2, and I probably will add the rest for chapter 4. So there's approximately 30 videos out there. And what I've decided to do, a little late in the game, but what I decided to do was, before I go on and actually start to do some of the server-side JavaScript, I've decided to first go on into, start talking about whatever you want to say. I've told you all before that I'm a follower of Brad Traversy, and Mr. Traversy put out his own book, 306 pages. It's called Brad Traversy's Web Dev Guide. You can buy it. If you go out to traversymedia.com, you can go out and buy it. It was $10. Yeah, I bought it. A complete guide to web development technologies, concepts, career paths, and more. 2022-2023 edition. He actually looks like he published it himself. And I'm not going to run through the table of contents because it's long. But you'll notice he's got front-end basics and a lot of the stuff we've talked about already. Then he goes into back-end development. And again, the stuff we're going to be talking about. All right. Finally, he goes into some trends and new technology, other programming concepts. Okay, so I'm going to hit on some of this stuff. Now, Brad's an interesting guy. I'm just going to call him Brad. No, I call him Mr. Traversy when I talk to him. But the point is, by his own admission, All right, he said he grew up with very little money and became a drug addict at 17. He was homeless, in rehabs, and even spent time in jail. But he got himself together. He's now a millionaire. And he is one of these people who, in my opinion, just gets it. He can look at a new technology and he can explain it in a way people can understand it. He's got hundreds of free YouTube videos out there. In addition, he's got classes that he's created as well. So, why did he write this book? As it says, learning web development can be very overwhelming. It's difficult just to learn what you have to learn. So he says he put out a practical guide to web development video. Well, let's see if that's even out there. So I'm going to highlight that rather. And I'm going to come out here and I'm going to go out to YouTube. And I'm going to put in Brad Traversy, Practical Guide to Web Development. And there he's got Web Development, a Practical Guide. I think I've watched this. It's been a while. 6 months ago is when it came out. And we may very well go and watch this in the first day of class. All right. But what I've done, and I've got to go through my stuff, is I have made my own little summary of what Mr. Traversy has done. Okay, so I'm going to go over quickly some of the high points and then hit some of the summary that I've done. Okay, all right. And again, there's no way in heck that I'm going to sit there and spend hour after hour and go over all of this. It would be silly to do that. He admits in here he's not a writer, he's not a professional author, and the guide, as it says, this is always a key point. There is no one size fits all to learning or choosing a path. You can all learn this stuff, but you can all learn it in a different way. Some people are very visual, some people are very textual, some people like to be talked to, some people hate to be talked to, etc. He says, keep in mind that the main point of this book is to let you know what everything is and what to learn. All right. There is his, it says you can find the ebook here. Let's see if we can. So here is the YouTube video, some of his courses. Yeah. And I've taken a bunch of these courses or am taking a bunch of these courses. Let's see. Here it says my web development guide ebook. It's exactly what I just showed you. That's it. All right. All I got was a PDF copy. 306 pages. And it was $9.99. I'm going to guess. There it is. Still $9.99. If you're interested. He's got 80 ratings and it averages 5 stars, which is pretty doggone good. Like I said, the guy just plain gets it. There is no way that you're going to learn everything that we talk about. Okay? Learning how to learn. One thing that he talks about, he's a self-taught learner. He mentions that he went to a technical college and it just wasn't working for him. All right? So he says here are some popular learning methods. Again, YouTube, and he's got YouTubes. Now it says here usually shorter videos, and that's interesting because a lot of his YouTube videos are crash courses that average in 1 to 2 hours. All right. Video courses. He has several courses on Udemy. Before he went to Udemy, he was on Eduonics, and you can get his courses through him as well. Traditional books, documentation, etc. This is one that's sometimes overlooked, looking at other people's code. That doesn't mean stealing other people's code. That means going out and using it as a baseline or whatever to get started. It says, I would suggest trying a few methods and see what works with you. As I said, I prefer video because I like to learn with real projects. So I like to build along with the instructor. This is also how I like to teach. That's what he does in a lot of his courses. He'll tell you to code along with him. All right. Forget about remembering code. As he says here, one of the big misconceptions with coding is that you need to remember, or even worse, memorize things. It's not so much that as that you need to know where to go in order to find out information. He suggests keeping the document available to you. Okay? All right. Now, he talks about formal education. He says, one of the most common questions that I get is, do I need to go to college? And he says, this is a tough one to answer. Everyone learns in a different way and has different goals. He says, if you take the I out of there and you take it to, do all developers need a college education? The answer is absolutely not. And he gives his own story. But then he comes back and says that college is not a waste of time. He says, I think the biggest advantages to getting a degree come from the following: the social learning setting that you get. And let's face it, you don't get some of this when you're taking courses online. Having a set curriculum. I think that you'll agree when we start going over the syllabus that we do have a set curriculum. All right. The credentials definitely help when you're looking for a job. You don't need a degree, but it can sure help get your foot in the door. All right, he says you can learn much more on your own, but that depends on the person. All right. And he talks about boot camps, and what his bottom line on boot camps is they can be thousands of dollars. I saw one recently that was $25,000, and it was, I think, for about 4 months, and it was very heavy. And they promised that you would get a job within 6 months or you would get your money back. I mean, everybody's different in the way they do these. And he gives a few of them. So the bottom line, he says here, is, and that's the truth, everyone's different. He says, I think for most people, self-teaching is a great route. There is nothing you will learn in college that you can't find online. Pretty much agree with that. Many instructors online are better than the college professors. Okay. Take everything that I say here with a grain of salt, because he's one person with one opinion. Deciding to go to college or not go is a huge decision not to be taken lightly. I agree with all that. All right, so his overall goals. He said, let's first talk about your overall goals and why you even want to code. One of the things he loves most about coding is just how much you can do with it. All right, he says, what do you want to do when you get done? Option one, work as a developer at a company. Remember that in the application and website development program, or AWD program here at Rankin, half the courses that you take, the AWD 1100 Programming Fundamentals with C# and the AWD 1112 Mobile Application Development, those are application development classes. You learn how to build business applications in C#, basically in the AWD 1100. You learn how to build Java applications and eventually Android applications in the AWD 1112 class. Many developers are very passionate about coding, so to be able to get up every day and do what you want is a dream come true. All right. Some good websites to look at for developer positions, and I've talked about many of these. Indeed.com is kind of my go-to when I'm looking at things for people. I've gone to Career Builder. I've gone to Mashable. I've never even heard of Crop or Authentic Jobs. It says I will also include a link in the link section at the end of the book to an article that I wrote with 70 plus job sites, so we can look at that later. Now, sometimes this happens with people. They freelance. They create their own business, either because they want to or because they just fall into it. All right, they decide they don't want to work for other people. They don't want to work with other companies. They want to stay home. Now, one thing about this, he says here, in order to freelance, you have to be very disciplined. I would 100% agree with this. It's very easy for Mr. Traversy to take 1, 2, 3, whatever weeks off. If you watch enough of his videos, he's got a couple that he does from actually inside his house, and he's got like an unbelievably expensive looking studio down in his basement. All right. But he is very disciplined. When he gets to working on something, he seems very disciplined and very dedicated. I remember years ago, I had a friend of mine. He was a steel salesman, and he was allowed, this was way before the pandemic. We're talking here probably about 15 years ago. And he was told that they were going to start where he worked. It took him an hour to get into work every day. He worked outside of Chicago. And they were told that Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays they would have to come into work. Tuesdays and Thursdays they could work from home. Well, to get himself into the mindset, etc., he set up an office for himself in his basement. And I know this sounds a little hokey, but he literally put on his suit and tie, got up, showered, shaved, went down, dressed and put on his suit and tie, went downstairs and worked all day. All right. Says if you think that you're interested in this rather, he's created a freelance course that you might want to take a look at if you think you're going to start a freelance business. Probably the best site on here to go to if you're interested in getting started in this is to go to upwork.com. If you've never gone into Upwork, what it basically is you get to bid on jobs. All right, so somebody's looking for a website to be created or a website to be updated. And it's not always the person who makes the lowest bid, although it often is, but it's, you might get contacted and get to work. Then you literally have a contract that you come up with people. All right, option 3, build your own product. I know that in the past, it's not shown in here, and I don't know if Mr. Traversy would actually say it falls under this domain, but about 10 years ago, I got contacted by a person who creates a lot of courses for Udemy. And he wanted to know whether or not I'd be interested in creating a Udemy course with him. I did a bunch of videos. He liked the content. All right. But there were things that just between the two of us just didn't mesh. So it didn't work. Hey, stuff happens. It's okay. I didn't hold it against him. I've still taken courses from him afterwards. Creating educational content. When the day comes, I'm 65 years old. When the day comes that I retire, this is probably what I'm going to do. Either I'm going to create my own blog and put stuff underneath there, or I might see if I can get a job for a company that does a lot of online type of stuff. All right, and I'd either create or teach online or both. Some people code as a hobby, as it says right there. All right. So let's quickly look at this. Different types of web developers. A web developer is someone who builds and maintains websites and web applications. There are mainly 3 types. There's the front end, the back end, and the full stack developer. Now the AWD 1100 Web Development Technologies class, the first class most of you take here at Rankin Technical College, that's a front end developer class. All right. Much of what you will take in this class, the AWD 1111 database-driven web development, is back-end. But we do get into what's called the MERN stack in here. MERN is an acronym that stands for MongoDB, which is a type of database. Express, which is a framework you use with Node.js. React, and Node.js. So M for MongoDB, E for Express, R for React, N for Node.js. That's the MERN stack. If you can do that, you technically are a full stack developer. So he goes into a front end here, and that's basically, let's face it, that's what the hallmark of our AWD 1000 class was. Learning HTML, learning CSS, learning JavaScript. We also did go over some jQuery. We went over Bootstrap, etc., but pretty much that was it. Now, we didn't do a lot of work with APIs. We will in this class. All right, we'll actually start by doing a little API work, at least that's the plan, with regular vanilla JavaScript. Now it says here the average salary of a front end developer is around 93 grand a year. But as always, it depends on a lot of factors. All right. So next he goes into talking about back-end development. And he says here, you can think of a web application as a house. The front-end developer does the painting, the interior design, and the placement. The back-end developer does the foundation and creates the walls that hold everything up. Back-end developers create the functionality and logic that runs on the server. That's what this class is about. There are different ways this class could be taught. We are using the MERN stack. I already told you about that. And we are using Node.js, which, for lack of better words, in a nutshell, is JavaScript on the server. All right. It says if you have an e-commerce website, the front-end developer creates basically your interface. But the actual ability to make stuff happen in there happens on the back end. All right. Typically, as it says, it works with data stored in a database. Back-end developers are usually not concerned with what a website looks like. That said, full stack are. So it's interesting because front end, we had 93, 167, and 8513, whereas back end is lower, 92, 238, and 74,096. That said, my guess is those of you watching this lecture, none of you would probably balk at making 92,000 or even 74,000. All right, so finally there's the full stack developer. And as it says, they do what you'd expect. They work on both the front end and the back end. All right, it says depending on what you want to do, you should pick a stack and study everything from creating APIs to creating user interfaces. That's what we're about in here. All right. It says here it's also important to mention that these days the lines that separate front end and back end are becoming more blurred. Not just because of the software and frameworks as they talk about in here, but because it depends on the size of the company that you get hired into and exactly where you want to go in that company. Now, full stack make more. Notice they're up over 100K, almost 110, and their base pay is 95. And as he says here, they typically make more because they need to know more. All right, so I'm going to stop right here and I'm going to pick it up in just a bit in Chapter 2 on front-end basics.